Okay, thanks all for coming, and welcome to this webinar from the Just Centre, the Centre for Joined Up Sustainability Transformations. This is a webinar presenting a sort of mapping exercise that we've done in the centre over the last 6 to 8 months, partly for us to start the work of the centre, which we started last year, and also then to plan work in the future. But we wanted to sort of provide a snapshot of where we think the state of play is in the focus of the centre's work in joined up sustainability transformations. My name's Matt Patterson. I'm a professor of politics at the University of Manchester, and I'm the deputy director of the Just Centre. And joining us today presenting are Lucy Middlemiss and Samantha Thamina-Miller, and the three of us have led the process of producing this report. So, Lucy, do you just want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Lucy Middlemiss. I'm from the University of Leeds and I'm a professor in environment and society.
And Samantha?
Hi everyone, afternoon. I'm Samantha Thamina-Miller. I'm a senior research manager at the Young Foundation, and the Young Foundation is the impact lead for the Just Centre.
Thanks. And we're also joined today, and delighted to be joined today by two people from some of the initiatives we've been looking at in this review. So one is Anissa Saleh from Climate Sisters, and one is Andy Pinches from the Rossendale Valley Energy Cooperative. And they'll introduce themselves. As part of this presentation, they're going to do a talk about their particular initiative that is also part of the survey. So this doesn't want to move. So a quick thing about the Just Centre for those who haven't come across us before. So our focus is on sustainability transformations that are people-centered, joined up, and socially just. So just spells out joined up sustainability transformations, but it's also thinking about the intersection between climate action and social justice. And so those are three questions up on the slides that are sort of animating our work across the life of the centre, which will run from 2025 to 2030. So what works, when, where, and for whom. Also what might work, right? What doesn't currently work, but we could think about how it might work better. How, where, and with whose participation can sustainability transformations be accelerated? And what lessons for just sustainability transformations can governments, businesses, and communities learn from place-based co-produced action research? We have six overarching research themes that then inform this work. Principles of justice, democratic innovations, social solidarity economies, social and built infrastructures, policy governance and change, and methodological innovation. And those then work across 5 areas that is the principal sites where we're carrying out work: West Cumbria, the northeast of England, West Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, and Merseyside. And those are sort of roughly coincide with the 5 universities that are the universities involved in the consortium. So Manchester University, Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle, and Lancaster. And we then have a set of things about thinking about what the implications of the research we do in those areas are across the UK as a whole and maybe beyond. So what we're trying to do at the moment is to map the landscape, and we've been constructing a database of initiatives across those 5 areas and in some cases beyond, where we think that there are organisations already doing this, joined up social justice oriented transformational initiatives, or at least could become initiatives that could become like that over time. So there's a widespread recognition that social justice implications of sustainability are receiving increasing attention, and also recognition that some of the forms of things like policy design are failing to deal with social justice adequately. So we need rethinks. There's all sorts of new links that are emerging between justice and environmental agendas that are worthy of study, but also understanding what's happening in the north of England is particularly important for our work with people. So we're planning to do an awful lot of work with community organisations, with combined authorities, with municipal governments and businesses, and so on. So this is a sort of preparatory piece of work to work out who is already doing things in this area. And so we're using this report also to build our relationships with those organisations to be able to do more work with them in the future. So how we've gone about this, producing this report. and there'll be a link to the report at the end of the webinar later on, or end of the presentation later on. So this is purely based on desk research, where we got Just Consortium members across the 5 universities and the Young Foundation, collecting examples of initiatives across the region. By the time we did this research, we had about 140. We now have about 300 in that database, and we asked people to say, find initiatives, and they could be by all sorts of actors, that are climate focused, justice oriented, place based, and joined up in some way. And then we selected from that, Samantha and Lucy and I selected 35 from that total number for the review from the wider sample. And we selected those to be quite diverse, different types and so on. It's not a representative sample in that sense. And we asked of those initiatives, who is leading them, what sorts of actors are involved, how are they being funded, what do they look like strategically, how are they being envisaged in particular places, and who is being engaged with them, what types of citizens are being engaged, and what are they being asked to do. And we've presented a draft of this report to about 145 partners in just regional events across the 5 regions, to get feedback and so on. So this is the sort of final version that we're publishing late this presentation is part of the publication process for that. So that's it from me to start with. And what we thought we would start with is one of the initiatives itself, which is the Climate Sisters Network, organised through the the Climate Sisters initiative organised through the Women's Environmental Network. So I'm really pleased now to hand over to Anissa Saleh, who's going to present what WEN is doing, and how that fits into the sort of overall scheme of what we're doing. So Anissa, over to you. And just let me know when you need to move a slide forward.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Anissa. I work with the Women's Environmental Network. We have a number of campaigns, programs that engage women more broadly. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I am responsible for our Climate Sisters program in Manchester, which I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour. So next slide, please, Matthew. So yeah, as I've said, WEN is an environmental charity working on issues that connect women, health, equity and environmental justice. We've been running since about 1989, so we've been around for quite some time. And we're an inclusive organisation in that we welcome everyone who shares our mission. We use the word women, but WEN views issues from a gender and intersectional perspective, and is inclusive of gender, non-binary, trans and gender non-conforming people. So our mission is to work collectively to create viable alternatives to oppressive systems, to end the exploitation of women and the natural world. So we work on many different projects and campaigns, which I'm specifically going to talk about the Climate Sisters program. Next slide, please, Matthew. Thank you. So we look to take a feminist, intersectional feminist perspective, and when we believe there's a holistic approach is needed to address the climate crisis that centres gender, racial and social equity, alongside transition into a low carbon economy. So it's really great to be here in this space to sit alongside the work that the Just Centre are focusing on and highlighting this particular programme. We're funded by the National Lottery, it's the CAF fund, and we've been successful. We started as a project, as a pilot project in London, and due to successful funding, we'll be rolling the programme out for 5 years and what looks to be 7 years now. We've just had news through. And so, again, we believe that being able to address gender, racial and social inequality without being able to address those effectively, we won't address the climate crisis. Looking at our current economic system and the intersecting crises have contributed to climate breakdown and inequality. So there's a pushback on that. And we believe that prevailing model is directly contributing to both environmental degradation and the growing disparities in wealth distribution between individuals and communities. So with these two crises deeply interconnected and exacerbating each other, we're looking to bring about programs that can push back against this in terms of connecting communities and also affecting policy and decision making. Next slide, please, Matthew. So this is the Climate Sisters program I've been talking about. So it's a feminist climate leadership program, and it's about joining up climate action and social justice in a way that's about including people who are not usually included in these conversations, debates and processes. So namely racialized and marginalized women. So the program is about building power with people to have a much bigger voice, to be in dialogue and to lead on the solutions that we need. And as part of the program, each person is, we go through phase one is a 10-week program where we look at local climate concerns and how that's impacting and affecting communities. And then the participants are supported to develop a creative response to their climate concerns, which then takes the form of co-creating exhibition showcase of these projects and ideas. So we're really wanting to amplify racialized and marginalized women's voices in climate action and policy. And through this approach, we hope to mobilize an inclusive, intersectional and feminist movement of women taking action for a healthier planet. Okay, so yeah, the need for diversity of voices to be part of the conversation is where the work is rooted and we feel is really necessary. Next slide, please. So we take a very much a place-based approach to this work. It's rooted in community. We work with community where community is at. So being able to get close to the realities within those communities, the specific communities in terms of what those climate issues are. And the work is very much climate justice as racial justice focused. So connecting climate justice to housing, health, migration, safety and care, building leadership where women already live and organise, recognising that climate impacts are felt differently in different places. So each iteration of the programme will be very unique to that place and to those people. So the design is very responsive and shaped by local histories, those stories, power structures and the assets as well. So we're focusing very much on the lived experience and assets that come, that emerge out of those communities when we give it the space it needs. Next slide, please. So, yeah, we're very much partnership focused. We work with a number of different organisations to recruit and engage with women from those various diverse communities. And our partnerships, again, centre racialised and marginalised women as knowledge holders, not just as participants. So yeah, we're currently working with a couple of grassroots organisations in Manchester. We've got the SORN in Oldham, supporting action women, supportive action women's network. Sorry, my tongue getting a bit tongue-tied there, and also Women's Voices, which is based at the other end of the city. We also engage with local authorities and policy spaces to look at how we can, again, equip and upskill those women in terms of bringing their voice to decision-making tables, whether that's a round table or engaging with local councillors, to looking more nationwide in terms of engaging with our politicians as well to inform policy change. And we also engage with academic and research partners, Hello When, and Hello Justice Centre, I should say, and environmental and climate justice networks as well. So it's a very collaborative approach that we take. And we also draw on the experiences and expertise of community leaders, and again, those with lived experience as advocates. Next slide, please, Matthew. And so, yeah, just to outline, oh, sorry, my Alexa's going off in the background randomly. Alexa, stop.
Anissa, you're still on mute.
Sorry, Alexa just jumped in and threw an utter curveball. I apologise. Wasn't expecting that at all. But yeah, so just to close, really, how do we try to influence policy? So we're supporting women to move from lived experience to develop a collective voice that will shape and inform advocacy. We create safe pathways. The trust and safe space is really important and integral to our work into local and regional policy spaces, and feeding grassroots insights into those consultation processes, bridging community organising with institutional influence, shifting narratives about who climate leadership belongs to. So we really want policy influence to not be extractive, to be very much relational, accountable, and rooted in community. Next slide, please, Matthew. So yeah, if you'd like to find out more, you can reach out to us at When. We've got our website at the bottom. I will probably struggle to hang around for Q&A, but if there's anything that's coming up in the chat, I'll try to respond. Similarly, you can get in touch. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Anissa. It's a real inspiration to hear about your work with Climate Sisters, and really nice to have you here today to represent it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to kick off the part of the presentation where we tell you about the key insights from the work that we've done in Just. So Samantha and I will be summarising the answers to each of the questions we asked at the beginning of the review in turn, using some examples to bring to life the overall findings. And in the middle, we'll hand over to Andy to talk about Rossendale Valley Energy. But let's have the next slide to start with. So our first question was, who's leading Just actions? And just to remind you, we went out looking for actions or initiatives that tackle sustainability and justice issues in place. What we found is there's a lot going on in the north of England on this front. Further, action is led by a really diverse range of actors, including, as listed on this slide, government, governance actors working across regions, NGOs, charities, grassroots and local groups, and businesses. Some examples of the kinds of organisations active in this space, which we covered in the review, are given on the slide. In both our desk research and in our interactions at regional levels through the events that we held, we found there was a perceived need to join up across these initiatives within and between regions. People are keen to know what other organisations are doing and keen to engage in mutual support and coordination. An example of this is, in our sample, is the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission, which has been joining up government, business, third sector and community actors in its region for several years, and more recently has launched a project on just transitions in strong partnership with its members and indeed with us. Next slide, please. We also set out to find out how actions were being funded, and here the results are less diverse, with government, national, combined authority, municipal or local authority, and the National Lottery being the most mentioned sources. So regional and local government funds are often allocated nationally, and there's often competition for scarce resources here to secure money to fund projects. Lottery funding is also competitively distributed with a high bar. So our participants in the regional events told us that large charities and research bodies seem to be disconnected from the grassroots realities, where people are actively looking to empower local actors, but often struggling to fund them. The fact that funding tends to be short-term, project-based, highly competitive and inconsistent is a huge challenge for our partners who are trying to sustain change in the long term. Next slide, please. We were interested in the strategic approach being taken to work that crosses between climate and justice, partly to see how people are framing what they're doing, but also to see how this fits into their sort of broader agendas. So we can see that government action on just tends to be really clearly linked into broader strategies. For example, The Atom Valley Initiative in Rochdale, Oldham and Bury in Greater Manchester is conceived of as a centre for low carbon activity that supports Manchester's 2038 net zero ambitions, with a focus on jobs and skills in these two boroughs which have high levels of multiple deprivation. Another insight on strategy was that projects tended to start with an interest in either climate or justice and then join up to the other. So typically, community or third sector led projects tend to start in the justice space and join up with climate issues, and government led projects start in the climate space and join up with justice issues. So an example from the charity sector here, Recycling Lives, a charity based in Preston, which supports ex-offenders and prison leavers to gain experience and skills working in the organisation. They redistribute surplus food in the region and aim to reduce homelessness, teach cookery skills and tackle food poverty. You can see how this starts clearly in the justice space, but has really positive environmental goals as well. I think I've already made the point about hubs and networks on a previous slide, looking to join up action in between regions. So I think I'll finish there and hand over to Andy Pinchers from Rossendale Valley Energy, who's going to give us an insight into their Net Zero Terrace Street project, which is another one of the examples that we used in the report. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, I'm Andy Pinchers, and like Anissa, I'm going to try and do a whistle-stop tour through the Net Zero Terrace Streets project. As the name suggests, what we're looking to do is target some of the country's most kind of left behind properties to help bring communities along net zero pathway and along the decarbonisation pathway in a way that is inclusive and is affordable for people. So next slide, please. Is my introductory slide, and I've already introduced myself, so please, next one, please. As a lot of you will know, you know, the reason why terraces are getting left behind at the moment in kind of the retrofit space, especially when it comes to the decarbonisation of heat, is that the main option here is an air source heat pump. And a lot of properties like the ones you see here, this one's taken in Bake-Up in Rossendale, they're straight out onto the street at the front, and they've got little yards at the back that there's just not enough space there for an air source. And if you move, it's not quite the next slide, but if you click the mouse, please, Matthew. There are also a lot of properties like this to back where there is just no space for an air source heat pump. And, you know, innovative things are coming out all the time. I've seen air source heat pumps that have been retrofitted into chimney stacks that are on some sort of button powered lift that come out of the chimney stack, and they're hugely expensive and intrusive. So there's not a lot of space here. And then next one again, please, Matthew. And then you've got properties like this that have been already half retrofitted into shops with apartments above. How do you retrofit and decarbonize the properties that sit above that? Next one, I should really have taken these out. The private rented sector will look to electric boilers. And we were hoping the Warm Homes Plan would have something more around the kind of termination of gas installs, but we'll wait with bated breath on that. But when that does come around, electric boilers are a cheap alternative. It's off the wall, on the wall. You don't necessarily need to do anything to the property itself. It's cheap for potential landlords to put in, but not for the person that's living in the property, and it can push people further into fuel poverty. So, next slide, please. What have we come up with? Next slide. We're taking a lot of inspiration from social housing and kind of tower blocks, and our director Kate always says that a terrace street is essentially a tower block on its side. So a lot of tower blocks have kind of adopted the ground source route. So we've been working with Tensa to kind of have a look at how you would put a looped ground source ambient loop under the street, and then connect each property in there. So the shoebox that's on the left there, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's a bit bigger than a shoebox, and I've got some pictures later on to show. It's a small ground source heat pump at 5.8 kilowatts. And the idea is that each terrace would have an individual heat pump in the property connected to system of boreholes that will go down the street. And then on top of that, there'll be some fabric retrofit. We're looking at designing it slightly backwards. So we'll have pre-sized that heat pump at 5.8 kilowatt. And then we will do essentially heat loss calculations on the property and design the fabric retrofit measures to fit that. So we're not doing super deep, super disruptive work. We're just doing enough retrofit to the property so that we can put that heat pump in and the house can be affordable and warm enough for the person that lives in there. Next slide, please. And then on top of that, we're looking at building a smart local energy system that will sit kind of over the top of these properties. So we're also looking to put solar and batteries in where we can get them. But we're designing this system so that it's essentially fair. So if you've got a terrace that runs east to west, for example, normally the south-facing side would get all the solar, but we're building the system to essentially aggregate that solar gain and then give it back to the community fairly across both north and north and south facing terraces, so that everybody can benefit from that. And then on top of that, we'll be working on developing kind of a community energy management aggregator that will sit between the houses and the grid so that we can create local energy flexibility markets so that people can essentially buy and sell electricity hyper locally. Next slide, please. And all the while, we're working on how we make this community based and community owned. So there's a lot of governance that has work that's gone into this as well. And we don't want to be an organisation that parachutes into other areas and starts dictating how things should be done and how things should be run. So we're working on this kind of model here where we will go to an area and work with local grassroots organisations, community energy organisations, and build up essentially a local delivery organisation that has input from community members, input from the local authority, input from local business, so that you can start to design this in a way that makes sense to the people that live there. And then we'll integrate with the DNO, the network operator, and then on top of that, we've got the Fairer Warmth platform, which I'll go into in a little bit. Next slide, please. So we've not just it's not just a theory anymore. We've managed to do a few properties with some funding through Innovate UK. So I thought I'd have a couple of pictures here just to show you the more ambiguous side of stuff. So next slide, please. This is a very dreary day in Rossendale. They are installing the ground loop into the borehole that they've just drilled. You can see the drilling rig on the left-hand side there. So this will be connected up to one of those properties you see behind. Next slide. This is them connecting it to the property. So there's a little bit of groundwork that needs to be done where they connect kind of the drilled hole up to the property. Next slide. And then here it is in the house. As you can see, you know, the shoebox is definitely a misnomer. It's about 2/3 the size of the washing machine there. But they've been very good with the way that they've managed to kind of fit all of this in. The hot water tank's gone in, and it kind of looks a bit like a plant room on the left-hand side. And I really need to update this photo on the right-hand side. They've boxed it in and they've made it look very nice now, rather than this was when it was initially just boxed in. But it's in there, it's accessible, and it shouldn't have to be touched by the residents. So we've taken these properties off gas and put these in. Next slide, please. And then all the while, I should say that there's a whole bunch of fabric measures and solar and battery that have gone in, but I could fill this with pictures, so I've just left it at the more ambiguous stuff. But we're also monitoring as we're going, so we've got lots of data dating back quite a fair way now. But looking at how the heat pump's performing, how the insulation's performing, how the solar's performing, so that we can get a good idea of kind of baseline costs to people that are living in the property. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we're working with the Centre for Energy Equality to make the whole process as frictionless as possible. So we at RV Energy have a number of energy champions that go out into the community, help out with everything to do with energy and everything that's not to do with energy. With bills, debts, all sorts of things, we can help kind of be that referral network. We also have this Fair Warmth portal that we're developing. So it will be a customer facing, there'll be the householder portal that people will be able to see and use in their own homes to support through the process, be informed, have appointments that they can book, contracts, permissions, photos, anything that kind of happens as part of kind of the process, they will have kind of within the app. If you go on to the next slide, please. But then there's also the energy champion side. So the energy champions can also see what's going on in each property. So if somebody doesn't use the internet or doesn't want to use the app, then we have this way of doing it as well. The energy champion can work on their behalf to make sure that they're not just being left by the wayside because they can't use the app or they don't want to use the app. That we're making sure that connection is going through and they're getting everything that everybody else in the street is getting as well. Next slide. And then we've got the supplier side. So we've got any installers that we bring through. They have to build a profile. They have to make sure they've updated and inputted all of their kind of relevant data, their insurances, their kind of DBS checks and stuff like this, to make sure that they can work on the side. But then they can open slots so that they can essentially say, I'm available on these days, and then it will get sent out to people that we can book in sometimes to get assessments done or installation fitted. And then next slide. And then there's the admin side as well. So there'll be an overarching kind of monitoring QA process that sits behind it all to make sure that everything's running smoothly. And then eventually, when this is up and running, through the monitoring that we have in properties, we should be able to see on here if there's any discrepancy. So if we've got issues like energy use spiking, but temperature either staying the same or going down, we know that there might be a problem somewhere, so that we can then get in contact with people and say, oh, are you having a bit of an issue with your heat pump? We've noticed it, and we can notice it before somebody gets a shock bill then, because normally they'll do that for a month, they'll put the meter readings in the bill and be like, oh no, what have I done? Whereas we can support, and they'll be able to see this on their own app as well, so that they'll be able to see what's going on. I think next slide, please. I think that's all I've put in. Like I say, I think there's a lot that I could squeeze in here, and I could probably take up the whole hour, but I've kind of trimmed it down for now, and I'll take some questions in the Q&A for things I'm surely missed out.
Thank you, Andy. A real pleasure to have you and Anissa add a little bit of extra colour to the findings that we're sharing here. So I'll be picking up where Lucy left off in terms of some of those key insights that we found across the report. So being joined up, as you probably gathered, is a key criteria of a Just initiative. And across the initiatives, we saw 4 key agendas being tied to more socially just climate action. Regional development was a key connecting agenda in the context of jobs. So Lucy shared the example of Atten Valley earlier, but also enabling strategic investments in a place through, for example, the Greater Manchester Clean Air Plan, and also generating locally controlled economic benefits through Project Colette. We also saw a strong tie to health, and particularly around improving air quality in urban areas, such as the case with the B network in Manchester. And there were also examples of initiatives focused on health benefits from improving energy efficiency in the home. And we've obviously just heard from Rossendale Valley Energy. Several of the initiatives that we looked across are working to agendas around community building and improving place. So Food and Solidarity in Newcastle are addressing fairer outcomes from the food and housing system. And St Helens Active Travel is framing active travel as an opportunity to promote community building. And then finally, there was a cluster of initiatives joining up in terms of collective governance and networking. And that includes groups such as Zero Carbon Cumbria and Climate Action Needs. And throughout, we saw lots of different framings and articulations of the different justice agendas that initiatives are working towards. We heard we had a couple of examples from our speakers, but to name a few others, the Welsh Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is working with an explicit intergenerational justice angle, and AfricaWOD addresses racial justice by helping migrant women into employment in the low carbon sectors. Next slide, please, Matt. The final thing that we were interested in understanding is how the public are being engaged through the initiatives that we mapped. And we saw 5 different mechanisms for engagement across the board. We saw lots of examples of trying to enable political participation, be it through deliberative processes such as the Copeland's People's Panel on Climate Change, tongue twister again, or by expanding the political capacities of citizens. We had the example of Climate Sisters, and then there's also the Transitions Town model, which encourages and enables communities to take climate action in various ways. We also saw initiatives trying to shape people's involvement in collectively organised low carbon living activities. And an example of that is Bristol Climate Hubs, who are working to helping people to take part in low carbon living in affordable ways. A third mechanism that was used is to use just initiatives to build community, and those such as Wellbeing Sheffield are in the first instance looking to build community wellbeing, and then in the second to enable that community wellbeing through low carbon living. We also saw an explicit focus on education, employment and skills, again with AfricaWOD and Recycling Lives, which Lucy spoke about earlier, or the example of Groundworks providing apprenticeships in retrofit and renewables management. And then finally, initiatives are also engaging people as citizen consumers. And by that, we mean that they are assumed to gain benefits, even if their participation is relatively passive. And we saw this across various initiatives trying to affect transport, energy and housing infrastructure. Next slide, and I'm passing over to Matt. Matt, you're on mute.
Thank you, Samantha. Sorry, a few things to wrap up. So what we're planning to do next is the underlying database that we have used as the basis for this review. We're still building, and we hope to end up with something that feels like a reasonably systematic survey, so that we can start to be a bit more, we can do comparisons across different types of initiatives and so on. And also we're planning to make that public when it's in that sort of, when it feels systematic enough to do so. We've also used it to build partnerships across those 5 regions for exploratory research, which we're just starting to carry out in the centre now through case studies and so on. And it's also helping connect to what is called a neighbourhood readiness tool, which will be launched later in the year, where we're using demographic data, and this is a team, part of the Just Centre team led at Leeds, colleagues of Lucy's at Leeds, to sort of systematically use demographic data to think about in what ways different neighbourhoods vary in their readiness. So if you saw, for example, with Andy's account of areas in Rossendale, that would enable us to think about systematically about what types of neighbourhoods structure, how easy it is for them to engage with net zero agendas and in a socially just manner. So one of the things, if you are part of one of these initiatives, or you think, oh, I'm doing things like that, then there is a form that says QR code will help, and we'd love it for you to just nip on there and say, oh, we think we're a socially just joined up initiative. Please include us in your database. So please feel free to take a quick photo of that with your phone, or there is a link, and these slides will be made available, and the video of this thing will be made available later. And then I might come back to leave that slide, so there's another opportunity. And then the PDF of the full review is now available, and we'll be sending you a link right after the webinar ends, so you get it a bit before everybody else, and then we'll be launching it sort of online through various mechanisms tomorrow.